and welcome to the City of Roswell Mayor and Council meeting for April 10th, 2023. I am Christine Hall, Mayor Pro Tem. For the record, Mayor Wilson has an excused absence, and I would like to recognize and acknowledge the council members present. Sarah Beeson, Lee Hills, William Morthland, Michael Palermo, and Dr. Peter Vanstrom. I will now turn it over to our City Administrator, Randy Knighton, to explain how the meeting is run. Mr. Knighton.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Hall. In accordance with Section Chapter 3.70 of the City Code, the City Council shall hold regular public meetings. The purpose of City Council meetings are for the public to participate and speak on agenda items which constitute formal decisions by the elected body. These items are listed on the published agenda, which can be accessed via the city website prior to the meeting. This is a public meeting, and some items do require a formal public hearing. A significant and important component of city council meetings are for council to hear directly from citizens on items listed on the published agenda. Public comments or questions are essential for mayor and council to incorporate as they contemplate each decision. Citizens are at the top of the organizational chart for the City of Roswell, and therefore, it is imperative for mayor and council to hear from the public in these meetings. If you would like to speak on an item, we ask that you fill out a comment card, which are located in the back of the room and at the podium, in order to ensure an accurate record of the meeting. We ask, of course, that everyone observe the principles of mutual respect and display the appropriate demeanor during the course of the meeting this evening, which should be and is a reflection of this great community. The Mayor Pro Tem is the presiding officer for this meeting and will ensure the orderly exchange of comments, questions, and discussion leading to decision-making by the elected body. We would encourage everyone in attendance and the viewing audience to visit the city website for meetings, events, and departmental information. We also encourage you to review and participate in various activities and offerings here in the City of Roswell. There are a number of events upcoming in the city. The Mayor Pro Tem will speak about just shortly, which promote community, physical activity, and leisure as we all make Roswell the #1 family community in America. Mayor Pro Tem Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Knighton. And I'm just going to announce we're going to have one slight change to the agenda. After the invocation and in helping with the Pledge of Allegiance, we're going to have the Boy Scouts join us. So at this time, I'd like to call Dory Griggs, the City of Roswell Fire Department Chaplain, to the front for the invocation and moment of silence.
Please join me. Living God, we gather tonight in gratitude for your presence during this very holy time of the year for our Jewish, Christian, and Muslim residents as they celebrate Passover, Easter, and Ramadan. Be with our residents of all faiths or no faith at all. The diversity of our community is a strength to celebrate. Tonight we show our appreciation of the service of Marine Corporal Fred Swain III. Our community values his service and the service of all our military veterans who work to protect and defend our great country. Bless them and the family members who support them. We ask for your presence as the City Council work to make decisions in the best interest of our great city. Guide their decisions tonight and bless our community. This is National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. We give thanks for the 911 communication professionals here in Roswell for serving as our first responders. They are the calm, professional voices you hear when calling 911. They work closely with the police, fire, and EMS professionals to keep our city safe. We are so fortunate here at Roswell to have an award-winning 911 communications department. We give thanks for the opportunity to gather freely to discuss the matters important to our city. Grant us wisdom in each discussion and decision that is made this evening. Amen. Thank you.
Now I would like to call Corporal Fred Swain III to come forward and lead us in the pledge, and would Troop 1134 would the boys please join up here in the front, and we'll turn towards the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Would one of the boys like to introduce your troop to everybody? If
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Isaac Sorcelli, and we are Troop 1134. Off the corner tonight.
Thank you very much. United States Marine Corporal E4 Fred Swain III. I'm going to have you stay up there and call the council down for the first agenda item under the mayor's report, which is the reading of the proclamation for the esteemed veteran of Roswell. Y'all hear? We're missing one. Is it on? Yep. Corporal E4 Fred Swain III, esteemed veteran. Whereas in 1963, upon graduating Murphy High School in Murphy, North Carolina, Fred Swain joined the United States Marine Corps and attended boot camp at Parris Island, South Carolina. Fred's first duty station was with the 2nd Marine Aircraft Wing in Cherry Point, North Carolina. During this assignment, Fred was deployed with the Marine Air Base Squadron 24 to Rota Naval Station located in Spain for the peacetime Operation Steel Pike. Steel Pike at the time was the largest amphibious landing since World War II in Korea. Its main mission was to practice and utilize updated machinery and technology to ensure that this type of amphibious landing was still viable. Following World War II, the next amphibious landing in history was successfully executed in Vietnam by our Marine Corps. In 1965, Fred received orders to the 3rd Marine Division, Fleet Marine Force in Vietnam for 1 year and 4 days. The parent unit was the Communications Company Headquarters Battalion, but also included temporary deployments to other units in support of combat operations against the insurgent Viet Cong. And whereas in August 1966, Fred returned home to the United States and was assigned to the 2nd Marine Division, 2nd Marine Regiment, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Shortly thereafter, Fred was promoted to Corporal E4 and transferred to the communication platoon of the 3rd Battalion of the 2nd Marine Regiment with the title of Wire Chief. Corporal Swain, at the age of 23, was responsible for all combat field wire communications and personnel of a Fleet Marine Force battalion landing team consisting of up to 1,000 Marines. In 1967, while his battalion, Fred was deployed to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, for base security duty until being transferred to Camp Lejeune for the processing of his honorable discharge. And whereas Corporal Swain has been honorably bestowed the following medals from the United States Marine Corps: Presidential Naval Unit Citation, Good Conduct Medal, National Defense Medal, Vietnam Service Medal with 2 campaign stars, Vietnam Cross of Gallantry, and the Vietnam Campaign Medal. And whereas upon completing his enlistment with the United States Marine Corps, Fred attended the Ringling College of Art and Design in Sarasota, Florida, and graduated in 1971. Fred spent most of his career as an artist with Lockheed Martin Aerospace Company, producing graphic design and illustration in support of sales and engineering. Fred has lived in Roswell, Georgia since 1974 and has been an active volunteer with the Boy Scouts, Roswell High School Band Association, Roswell Recreational Baseball, and a member of Roswell Lodge 165, Free and Accepted Masons. Now therefore, I, Christine Hall, Mayor Pro Tem and Council Member of the City of Roswell, do hereby name Corporal Fred Swain III, esteemed veteran of Roswell, and call upon all of our citizens to recognize his outstanding service to our country and our community, and that there is no higher calling than those who serve in the United States Armed Forces. Thank you, Fred. Would you like to say a few words?
Not much. First off, I'd like to thank everybody for coming, but especially my family, and of those, my daughter who drove all the way from Florida to be here. I'd like to thank the Brother Masons. Truly, without them, I might not have got through a lot of things in my life. They might not know it, but that's true. But I've enjoyed living here in Roswell. I think we came here in 1974, and I've been here ever since. And I still think that Roswell is a wonderful, wonderful place. I do. And I don't have anything much more to say than just that, so I'll keep it short. Thank you again, all of you, very, very kindly.
And we'd like to invite the family up for a picture, please. Jennifer, and everybody, come on up. You're in the middle. Yep, you're in the middle.
Thanks for making the drive up. Thank you again.
Come on, Roger. Oh, Roger. I'm just the master. Cool. Come on, kid. Thank you. Good.
We're crashing your picture.
Oh, okay.
Will ran off.
Cool beans.
Many things. A man of many things. Many talents. Some will never
Take it
know.
again, hold on a second. Hold on. Gotta take it again, don't go anywhere. The wrong
They want to take one more time with his thing up there.
I want to get a picture. Oh, okay. One more. Oh, we're doing one more? We're doing one more with a picture in the background. Yeah, that's a great picture there. That looks beautiful. I guess we can squeeze Fred in. Fred, can we just turn him sideways and put him in the front?
Thank you. I know. I was going to try and read without them, but then I thought, oh. And the final thing on the mayor's report is upcoming events in the city. And I am going to ask my colleague, Councilmember Lee Hills, if she would update us on the upcoming events.
I'd be happy to, Mayor Pro Tem. So we've got, you can see on the screen in front of you there, the Tillman Honor Run. And just for those of you that may not know who this is in honor of, it's a young man, grew up in California and was a linebacker at Arizona State University, was drafted to the Arizona Cardinals, and then it was a hot rod apparently in football. And the day after September 11th, he was interviewed, and he told the reporter, that he thought it was really a shame that we had so many freedoms and so many luxuries here in the United States that we take for granted. And so he decided to drop out of the NFL and go to work for the government in the way of being a soldier. So he went to Afghanistan, and due to his heroic efforts, he was able to save some of his folks in his battalion, but he didn't make it. So this is an effort to raise money. This is is it the 19th year? 15th? The 15th year, and we're lucky enough to be hosting that here in Roswell. It'll be Saturday, April 15th at 8 a.m. right here at Roswell City Hall grounds. We'd love to have you. You can scan the QR code that you see up here, or you can contact Seth Deichman, and that is at sethsundevil@yahoo.com if you'd like to run or walk, or just, you don't have to register to come clap and cheer. But it's a great event. I came and clapped and cheered last year because I don't run, but I think it's a great event for the city to host. We also have a volunteer appreciation luncheon coming up, and this is for all volunteers in the city of Roswell who have volunteered in some way or another in the last year at the Adult Recreation Center. So if that's you, please attend Wednesday, April 19th at 12 noon. And that's for everyone who's volunteered back from 2020 to 2022. So if you would call 770-641-3950, we'd love to get you on that list, and it is a lunch hosted by Big Oak Tavern. Thank you, Nate. You know what time it is. We're getting ready for everybody to be outside more, and that is just in time for us to open up Alive in Roswell, which will be Thursday, April 20th. It's from 5 to 9 throughout the whole season, goes through October. So we hope you'll join us on Canton Street and all the areas around for entertainment, socializing, food, drinks, and just having a good time celebrating the great weather and socializing for the summer coming up. We also have the Roswell Youth Theater main stage production, Meredith Wilson's The Music Man Jr. That's Friday and Saturday, April 21st and 22nd at a 2 p.m. showing and 7 p.m. both days at the Cultural Arts Center. And for those of you that want more information on that and other events going on, if you go to roswellgov.com, go to the far right top corner. This is going to be new and improved really soon, but at top right corner, there's a little tiny word that says calendar. And if you click on that, it'll open up our entire calendar for the city. And you can go right to the date you're interested in, which April 21st or 22nd. Click on the link for The Music Man Jr., and it has all the information on there for your ticket purchase, times and dates and seating. Also want to tell you, with spring coming, we've got Roswell Riverside Sound starting up again, and that is April 22nd, which is a Saturday, 7 p.m. It's a great free outdoor concert series, and you don't want to miss it. If you try one, you'll go to more than one. They're really fun. And then finally, if you're looking to hit a little culture around Roswell, I encourage you to take advantage of the free community day for our historic house museums. And that is on Saturday, April 22nd. It's from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And it includes free admission to all guests of all 4 of our historic house museums, which is Barrington Hall, Bullock Hall, Smith Plantation, and Mimosa Hall and Gardens. And that is Earth Day, isn't it? So you can check out some events at Mimosa Hall for Earth Day. I would encourage you to go see those. This mayor and council, are committed to putting our historic assets on the map in a really outward and memorable way. So there'll be a lot of opportunities to participate in fundraisers, social events, all sorts of things that will be monetizing those 4 places so that more people can enjoy our historic assets, and you'll be able to see them before they go live on some other levels. So stay tuned on that. We hope we'll see you out and about in Roswell, and I'll give it back to Mayor Pro Tem Hall. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Hills. And that was a nice little sneak peek as to our calendar. So at Alive After 5, we will be announcing a new calendar, so keep your eyes out for that. It'll be publicized there, and you'll be able to get more information on it. Next, we have the consent agenda. And does council have any questions or comments regarding anything on the consent agenda? Councilmember Beeson.
I just said that I will be abstaining due to potential contractual items with work that I do professionally with my firm and the fact that I work in the solid waste industry. So I'll just be abstaining.
Thank you. Anybody else? Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
I'll second as long as we're giving a chance for if public has any comments on it or questions on it.
That is not in my script, but is there anybody in the public that would like to comment on anything on the consent agenda? Please come up. And we know who you are, but for the record, could you please state your name?
Yes, Janet Russell, Roswell resident.
Thank you.
Item 4 on the consent agenda, I just have a question. What are we paying $100,000 for a modification on the historic Gateway project when it's already it's about a 1.2 mile project, and I think it's up to $50 million? And it's not projected to even start until 2026, and it's a failed project to begin with because no environmental studies have been done, nor have any archaeological studies. So what's the $100,000 for, please?
Councilmember Palermo, could you please address that?
So the discussion we had at the last committee meeting was for years and prior to this current mayor and the majority of the city council, we had made attempts to actually make the lanes more narrow on the Gateway project, and consistently GDOT had said, no, we cannot do that. They said we could just change the paint lines and that was it. And so now we've really been pushing for the opportunity to truly narrow the lanes, which will create more safety and just less attractive for just being truck cut through place. So the modification is us working really hard to be able to actually narrow the amount of pavement and narrow the actual lanes.
Thank you, Councilmember Palermo. Any other comments? Does your second stand?
It does.
All those in favor of the consent agenda, please raise your hands. And for the record, we have one abstention, Councilmember Beeson, and the rest is unanimous. Thank you. Next on the regular agenda is Administration and Governance Department. Councilmember Hills, will you read the first item, please?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. This is the approval of an ordinance to authorize Fulton County to conduct an election on November 7th, 2023, and runoff, if necessary, on December 5th, 2023, in an amount not to exceed $814,420.57, and that breaks down to $554,028.21 for November 7th, plus the $260,392.36 for the potential runoff. This is the second reading.
And our city attorney, David Davidson, can you please read the ordinance?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is an ordinance of the City Council to authorize Fulton County to conduct election. Now therefore be it ordained by the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell, and is hereby ordained and established by authority of the same, that the Mayor is authorized to enter into a contract with Fulton County Department of Registrations and Elections to conduct this election using express poll or other such measures approved by the Georgia Secretary of State, which contract is attached here to and incorporated herein by reference, and if approved, this would be the second reading.
Thank you. Mr. Knighton, can you please explain the item?
All right, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Hall. Earlier this year, the city of Roswell, as well as a number of other cities in North Fulton, began exploring the possibility of conducting either our own election or working jointly to conduct the elections in total. There were a number of public meetings that were conducted by mayor and council, including work sessions, committees, and then special call meetings as well to discuss the item. At that time, there were estimates that were provided based upon previous elections and based upon what we anticipated to be potential initial costs for conducting elections, as well as then ongoing costs for conducting elections. That was provided to mayor and council, and then the mayor and council wanted to further explore this possibility. And so upon further consideration and also then revised numbers from Fulton County, and given the very short timeline that was involved or would be involved in potentially conducting elections, mayor and council have provided direction, at least at this point, that we would move forward with entertaining an intergovernmental agreement with Fulton County to conduct elections this year. I would also, of course, remind the elected body and the viewing audience there was also a request from the previous meeting that there would be a second early voting site that would be requested from the city of Roswell to Fulton County. And Fulton County has provided some further information regarding that. However, I believe there are still opportunities for further discussion with Fulton County regarding a second voting site. And so we obviously had our first reading previously, and the second reading is before us this evening for consideration by mayor and council. Mayor Pro Tem and council.
Thank you, Mr. Knighton. Council member Palermo.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So as we've discussed in the multiple previous meetings we've had, I'm really disappointed with Fulton County to have increased the cost by so much and to have decreased service. And when you look at the other Fulton County cities, that we have a much greater voter turnout than so many of them, and to take away the location on the east side of Roswell, I feel is really making things more difficult for voters, which is not the direction that we should be going in. And so to see these cities that continue to maintain them with such a smaller voter turnout is, again, just disappointing. But that being said, for what seems, although it's a much higher cost than it should be, it's given the overall increase, it still is less than 10% of the cost to add the east. The location on the east side of Roswell, and I think it is important that we're showing to our voters at all times we're making it as easy and accessible as possible for anybody to vote, and hopefully for as many people as possible to vote. So with that, I certainly ask that this council consider supporting the making sure that we are going to have the same locations for early voting as every previous year.
Councilmember Beeson.
So each city in North Fulton, I didn't pay attention to the rest of Fulton, lost at least one early voting location. That included also Johns Creek as well as Alpharetta, as well as Roswell, our secondary location that we lost being East Roswell Library. In speaking with a council member with Johns Creek, I know that they're equally frustrated in losing that secondary location. To Councilmember Palermo's point, that I would be supportive of, I think it's $48,240 for the election, $23,841 for a potential runoff, $72,081.62 total potentially for re-adding the East Roswell Library. I think it would be beneficial if we reached out to, say, Johns Creek and maybe even Alpharetta to see if they'd be interested in cost sharing, because no one votes in a vacuum in Fulton County. That's to say that we would be covering the cost for East Roswell Library, but implying that we would also not be seeing people bleed over those lines back and forth, if that makes sense. As if we would not have Johns Creek voters also that could vote at East Roswell Library. So if we could possibly use that as a sharing or cost savings initiative, we could maybe talk to Johns Creek, throwing that out for the good of the order.
Councilmember Palermo.
So I know that we have the media here who does a great job covering Roswell. I know we've discussed a lot the importance of continuing to have the 2 locations, and just given 400, given the traffic, et cetera, that it really is just more difficult for Roswell residents. I haven't heard the other cities taking such issue with it, and I haven't heard of them reading from everything that I've read. At the end of the day, I represent the residents of Roswell, and I'm very frustrated that things are being made harder on Roswell residents, especially given we will have such a larger turnout than so many of our neighboring cities. At the end of the day, yes, certainly love the opportunity to reach out to Johns Creek or Alpharetta, et cetera. But at the end of the day, I think Roswell's been clear that it's important for us not to take away voting locations, and that's something that I think we need to support no matter what.
Councilmember Beeson.
I'll rephrase that. We would in turn be footing the cost for other people in North Fulton, such as residents of Johns Creek and Alpharetta, to also be getting the benefit of having a secondary location, which I fully support. I just think it would be beneficial for our taxpayers to possibly reach out to those other municipalities that would also get that benefit of an added location to see if we could possibly have cost sharing in that as well. Because it is $72,000, that's an additional $1 per voter.
Councilmember Palermo.
So if I'm hearing correctly, the thought is to ask if Alpharetta or Johns Creek will want to pay something extra for us to have our location in East Roswell that their residents could use. Because I guess I'm certainly happy. I certainly love the idea of us asking, but given that timing is of the essence, what I'm hesitant to say is that we are going to take away a voting location because another city didn't want to pay into that location. I guess that's where my concern or my confusion is.
Dr. Vanstrom, Councilmember Vanstrom.
Thanks. I'm sitting right in between this, and I think I've got this figured out. What you're asking for is basically permission to reach out to them. We're approving this. We're moving forward. And you would like permission to pursue a conversation, see if they would like to pitch in, secondary to our vote today.
Correct. I'm completely supportive of adding East Roswell Library back into as a secondary voting location, knowing that it would be also benefiting other municipalities. Why not at least get approval from council and Mayor Pro Tem in this situation to approach other municipalities to see if they would be willing to foot at least some of that cost, since they would be getting the benefit. That's why he's a doctor.
Thank you. Councilmember Palermo.
So I definitely appreciate the relationships we have with our neighbors. Historically, I'd say anytime there's been any opportunity for splitting the bill has not been ideal or fair. I love the idea of reaching out. I also love the idea of asking Fulton County that if we're going to be the ones paying for this location, can we get Roswell residents preferential spots in line, which might be equally. I might be equally optimistic in in what the response would be, but that being said, absolutely support reaching out and looking for support. But I think it is important that what we're moving forward with is including the location on the east side of Roswell as well.
Councilmember Morthland.
So we need to move this on. We need to have both locations on the vote, and we'll work out the rest of it later on. That's just where we are.
Councilmember Dr. Vanstrom.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out, too, I think this council is showing once again how committed we are to East Roswell. 100% always working hard for a unified Roswell, that both sides get equal treatment, east and west, and I'm glad we're moving this forward.
Before we go to the public, Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Hall, and I do appreciate the discussion from Councilmember Beason and Dr. Vanstrom, as well as Councilman Worthland. So, interesting, it is an interesting point that theoretically one of these other cities could end up potentially having a lot of residents voting in the location. I'm less optimistic they're willing to pay a fair share. That being said, I actually really feel that Fulton, it'll be interesting to see the information, because obviously we can see that information, but ultimately, Fulton County, if they're saying to open up the additional spot is $48,000 for the general election and $23,800 for the runoff, if in reality there should be I feel Fulton County should be paying a proration based on how many of those were Roswell residents versus how many of those were say Johns Creek residents. So I guess what I wonder about is should the approach be going towards the neighboring cities, or should the approach be basically going back to Fulton County with this is how we'd like to work that out? I'll leave it up to council. I think either way, I'm not completely optimistic, but I think what we're really focused on is making sure it's easy for people in Roswell to be accessing the early voting locations they've always been accessing.
Does anybody from the public want to come up? Please. Ms. Russell, if you would state your name for the record.
Russell.
Thank you.
Apparently, I've become the village historian. Just so you all remember, it's not east versus west. First of all, the west side of Roswell had no library for 36 months except for 7 weeks in January and part of February of 2020. We had no early voting location for anything on this side of town, not anything. So Fulton County closed our library for 36 months. It's the same Fulton County library, Fulton County, that puts on it's the same government. They collected our property taxes on the west side of town and provided us with no library at all. So I would think that you would like to go out with a little bit of ammunition, so to speak. Does any one of you, and I don't know, what is the square mileage of Johns Creek? Because Roswell is 42 square miles. And if a city that's, say, 20 square miles is getting one location and Roswell is 42 square miles, why are we only getting one location? And why is our city, which is divided by a Georgia 400, given the same opportunity? And I use that in a quote, because they didn't give us that opportunity in the last election when there was no early voting location on this side of town. People, if they didn't drive and they had to take public transportation, couldn't get to the east side of town. They would have to have Uber or Lyft, which represented maybe a $25 ride in each direction. And I believe that's the equivalent of a poll tax, which I believe was decided that was illegal a few decades ago. We couldn't charge people to vote. So you need to knuckle down on Fulton County and remind them they got our property taxes for 3 years and they didn't give us squat for 3 years. And they gave, Milton's library was open and closed 6 months, boom, done. Not ours. So don't just say, oh, we'd like to do this, or maybe you can do this, because I got news for you. If you can get something for free, they're not going to pay for it if their voters come over to us. Now, I have a hard time believing Johns Creek people will come to over here, but they might go to East Roswell. But why are we going to subsidize Johns Creek and Milton and Alpharetta? They're not going to pay for something that they can, if they can get it for free. That's just human nature. So know your history. Fulton County screwed us over for 3 years on this side of town, and now it's time to pay the piper.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from the public that would like to speak on this? Any scouts? All right, I'll bring it back to council. Any other? Councilmember Beeson.
Just to reiterate, we're fully supportive, I think, across the board of having 2 early voting locations in Roswell. I think the logistics are what makes it problematic. I don't think anybody on this council second guesses that we have a declining amount of quality in terms of what we're getting for return on investment with our elections, which is why in 2025, we're trying to target bringing those in-house. At this point, our goal is to try to make it work for 2023 and get the best of what we can do for all of Roswell's residents across the board, regardless of what section of the city you live in, and making sure that those are accessible locations, especially for those who are accessible via transit, which in this case, both of our libraries are accessible via transit. So with that, I am supportive of going ahead and approving, to Councilmember Palermo's point, the addition of the library. And I'll go ahead and I'll reach out to a council member in Johns Creek to see if they would be open to negotiations for taking on at least some of the cost, knowing that we will be taking on likely some of their voters.
Thank you. Councilmember Hills.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Hall. I just would like to add that, well, first of all, I know Sarah Beeson said she supported 25, so we're all in support of 25. So I'm leading in with that. You're on the hook. I know, I'm just giving you a hard time. I continue to be very disappointed that we're not hosting our elections this year. It is a burning hole in my stomach that we aren't doing that. This mayor and council has had an insurmountable load of things to look at, correct, work on, new plans, resurrect old plans, and so this did not get the attention that it needed for us to be in place. And among those things on the list that especially Mayor Wilson is pushing on is some reorganization within our city from the inside out. And we just didn't have that infrastructure in place to be able to pull off an election with fidelity for our residents. And it kills me. But I am absolutely committed to this, and we will be doing our own elections, hosting our own elections in 2025, and I'm very much committed to making sure that we secure that second early voting site on the east side of Roswell for all the reasons mentioned. So I will absolutely support this, but there is a fight to make sure that our residents are served on every avenue of Roswell. Thank you.
Before I call for a motion, is there anybody else that would like to make any comments? So in that case, Councilmember Hills, are you prepared to make a motion?
I am. Motion to approve an ordinance to authorize Fulton County to conduct an election on November 7th, 2023, and runoff if necessary on December 5th, 2023, in an amount not to exceed $814,420.57. This is the second reading.
A point of,
Read the whole thing.
did you plan on adding the second location to this second reading?
Sorry about that. With the caveat that we will add a second location for early voting on the east side of Roswell. Thank you very much.
Is that clear enough, David?
You might want to put the dollar amount.
Oh, let me, yes. Well, do you have it there? Forgive me.
Perhaps Mr. Knighton could just paraphrase that,
Yeah,
and
the
then
total, I'm sorry.
Okay, and that would include the new total for this, the second advanced voting location. The new total would be $886,502.19. Forgive me for my fumbling there.
So just to recap, this is the second reading. We're approving the second location for a total of $886,502.19.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And Councilmember Palermo is seconding. All those in favor? And it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Councilmember Hills, you have a second item. If you would read that, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Hall. This is the approval of a resolution of the mayor and council supporting the Roswell Housing Authority and promoting redevelopment of housing authority property throughout various means. Mayor Pro Tem, would you like me to expound on that a moment?
Yes, please.
All right, super. This is in regard to 199 Grove Way. This is a senior 40-unit building that is in our housing authority here in Roswell. I caution that part of this next statement will be cut apart and used against me, but I hate that we have our housing authority. I hate it that we have people that are in that capacity that need this kind of support and help. But I'm glad and happy that this mayor and council has embraced this opportunity to redevelop an area that is in bad need of repair. Our Roswell Housing Authority, in cooperation with the executive director of the Gainesville Housing Authority, who is the overarching capacitor of our housing authority, has managed to relocate all of our residents from there. They weren't thrown out, as people have said in the media. They weren't thrown out on the street and put out on the street. They were actually looked after and studied very carefully so that they could have their needs met and be relocated somewhere, most nearby, but some out of town, which is really unfortunate. So we have an opportunity now as the city of Roswell to take care of our Roswell residents in a fair and healthy manner, to get them into place right now while relocate them while we work with a developer, Penrose, to redevelop this property. And so we're looking at increasing the units from 40 to 102. And I've seen the plans, I've seen the drawings, and this mayor and council, best that I can tell, we'll know in a minute, is in support of doing this. These residents, I have said all along, that they will have the first right of refusal to come back to this property once it's developed and open for business, and we're proud to be able to offer that to our residents. So we are committed. I'm on record for it. I want to make sure that every single one of our Roswell residents that was moved out has the first right, an opportunity to move back in to our city, and where we can afford them wraparound services, much nicer living conditions, and familiar circumstance where they've grown to know and love this city. So I will be supporting this.
Thank you, Councilmember Hills. Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you. So, can you was this item at committee, Mr. Davidson or Mr. Knighton? Which committee was that?
Oh, it didn't go, it wasn't at the last committee, but
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember it. It came forward at one point previously.
Because I guess then because I don't recall this at committee, and so I guess what I'm wondering about is the specific timing on tonight. Is there an urgency this tonight, or is there the opportunity in 2 weeks?
Councilmember Hills.
Thank you. There is, not even a sense, there is an urgency to this. The way that the loans, actually, we've got our Housing Authority our board president and vice chair here. Maybe you can help me out with the exact dates and times on that. This is Karen Parrish and Eric Schumacher.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, Mayor Pro Tem, for considering the assistance that you are this evening. We are moving forward with a low-income housing tax credit application May 19th, and all of the T's need to be crossed, all the I's need to be dotted, and certain things in that application need to be in place by that time frame. So one of the things that the city has expressed an interest in is committing support for that application. That certainly gives us a number of points in this process that will help us score well, so that we hopefully win support that for an almost $30 million project. So definitely the support that the city puts forward this evening, and hopefully in the next month or so with maybe a couple other minor items, will help us score appropriately.
Councilmember Palermo, if I just may add, they were here at a council meeting and we discussed the zoning change that goes along with that resolution.
Yes, absolutely, and I gladly motioned and proudly motioned in support of that zoning change, and I remember we had discussed that first in committee, because I think there were a lot of clarifying questions that we hashed out at committee, and so I guess What I guess I'm just understanding, so I definitely understand the need for this. That's completely clear. I guess help me understand the timing on why it's so important that this moves forward tonight versus in 2 weeks.
Well, we are going through a worksheet that's a time schedule basically for the developer, and certain things we have to check off our list. If the city needs
more time to get this done. It's just imperative that it is included in our May 19th drop dead date to DCA. And so they've been waiting for something, and they've gone in good faith, spending upwards of 6 figures, moving forward on this application, that the city would bring forth some type of support in this manner. So this is a support of them while they're spending money to bring this to fruition. Do you have anything to add to that?
Okay, so what I'm hearing is there's a drop dead date in May.
Correct.
Okay.
But in the meantime, preparing this application is quite expensive. And we have been fortunate enough that 2 years ago, they brought one forward and we didn't have to pay a dime. And the same thing is applying here in this situation. They just wanted to have that commitment. They actually wanted it earlier, that the city would be supporting this project, because without it, the scoring may not be there for us to win the tax credits.
And thank you for that, and that makes sense. And I'll say I certainly support a resolution that does show the support for the Roswell Housing Authority and what's looking to be accomplished. It's, I think last meeting when we were discussing the zoning aspects, there is a very, just really sad and unfortunate situation that was occurring with the housing authority that didn't really set them up for success prior to you two being willing to volunteer and help out, really trying to get the housing authority in a much better spot than unfortunately it was put in, a few years prior to you two volunteering. And so I definitely support that. I think this right here calls out just really the importance that unfortunately we had a living space that was completely unsafe, and really, really happy and fortunate and appreciative of the hard work for you and the that staff member that you have to make sure everybody was moved into a safe place and that nobody was hurt, even though that was certainly something happening in other parts of the country. So definitely a major challenge that we need to help fix and really make sure we create that safety. I just, when we have, just residents seeing that we're pledging finding a way to support with $2 million, that's something where I would have preferred this go into committee and there just being a robust discussion so that residents can see that this council is doing two important things. One crucial thing, that we are looking after the safety of the residents living in the housing authority to make sure that is being solved, which with you two steering the ship now, there's a real path to that happening. And number two, to really ensure that we can show residents that we're being very judicious with the $2 million and really focused on our fiscal responsibility as well and our fiduciary responsibility. So from that standpoint, my preference would be if we could defer this, knowing that I believe this entire council would absolutely be supporting so much of what's in this resolution and making sure you have what you need to make safer housing at the Housing Authority. So that'd be my request just for consideration of this council.
Councilmember Palermo, I conferred with Attorney David Davidson, we could put this on committee tomorrow and then bring it back in 2 weeks.
That'd be my preference, and that would certainly be something I would vote in support for if that's the will of this liaison and this council.
Would any other council members like to comment before we open it up to Councilmember Beeson?
Could you walk us through again the timeline that you're trying to meet? And if that would meet your timeline?
What is the date of the next meeting?
So the committee is tomorrow, and then it would be 2 weeks out from today would be the vote.
What date is that?
April 24th?
We are getting closer and closer to that May 19th date. So it makes me a little bit nervous because sometimes wheels don't move very fast when you're trying to get wording and things nailed down. I do understand your concern about wanting to have a public comment period. Absolutely, I'm all about being open to the residents on what we're talking about supporting this project. So we would just have to have some type of assurance that there's, we're moving forward. I mean, like I said, our developer is spending six figures right now putting this application together. And you guys have been so supportive. Thank you so much for what you've done to alleviate our fears that this might not come to fruition. I really feel like it's going there. I'm just concerned that that if we push it back any farther, we are going to be in trouble. We could push it back to your next
Councilmember
meeting,
Palermo.
which is fine. I'm
I'd
just
s-
saying, if anything should happen,
I'd say my intent is definitely, I can't speak for any other elected official, my intent is absolutely to be voting in support of a resolution on April 24th. I would just want to make sure we're taking the time to make sure it has the right details. Is there anything additional that should be in there or not? And perhaps the answer is not, but I just want to make sure we have enough time for public discussion at committee tomorrow as well as on the 24th.
Councilmember Hills.
Thank you. Ms. Parrish, would you clarify, this is just a letter of commitment? This isn't ironing out the specifics of that. That is just a letter of intent from the city. So we will have an opportunity to go into great detail about the actual dollars. I'm all about the being loud and clear about what we're doing as well. But this is not nailing down the specifics. This is so that Penrose, the developer, can move forward knowing that they have what they need in their file from this point going forward for the May 19th. Then we'll walk through the other part of that.
correct. I mean, you're correct. This is not money that's being spent unless, in the event, we are awarded low-income housing tax credits for this project. So this is in the event that moves forward and happens, and we won't know. Our deadline is May 19th for the application, but the notification to let us know whether we are awarded that is in most likely November of this year. So nothing happens until that point, until we understand what our commitment is. And then even after that, there's several months that we are in preparation before we sign closing documents on that award, which will be most likely August, September, October timeframe in 2024. So.
And is that the point where we nail down the specifics from the city, what our support looks like in what, that not now? This is just a letter saying we're on board.
This is a letter of support, yep. right, in this amount. And how those, I mean, right now we are short. I mean, if you look at the numbers that have been tentatively run, we are short roughly $6.5 million.
Yep.
So we are still pursuing dollars through other avenues, through other grant programs and appropriations from our state senators and that type of thing. So we're still looking for other options and other ways to fund what we need in that $6 million. It's just once you go into the application process, there's a point structure that is awarded to you that makes it much more likely if you have your funding in place, and especially city support is so key for this to move forward. It was the one thing that was missing the last time that we went forward 2 years ago. We scored a half a point below the other proposals that went forward, and so we were not funded, they were. Having some type of city support in the way of funding would have made the difference. So.
Thank you. Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall. And so just an example on where I think would have been a helpful committee discussion is, so the key part on why I just want to make sure that we're having a good full discussion on it and all in agreement on the exact process is it mentions City of Roswell hereby supports the Roswell Housing Authority and is dedicated to provide $2,001 in support through various means, including grants and loans, in addition to other forms of support, including but not limited to infrastructure improvements and/or acquisition of Roswell Housing Authority owned property in order to promote safe, secure, and affordable housing within the City of Roswell. And that's where, for example, if they were happy or it met their needs of just, say, just infrastructure improvements, then I think that's fantastic. It may or may not, but hypothetically, if there was $2 million in infrastructure improvements, I'd be thinking, would grants and loans from the City of Roswell really be necessary? And those are things I kind of want to talk through, which typically would be questions I'd be having and discussion I'd want to have in committee. So that's why, again, I fully support the intent of this. I absolutely intend to vote for this. I just want to make sure that we have a full discussion to understand exactly what we're committing to and what we're not committing to. So that's my thought process.
Thank you. Any other, Councilmember Dr. Vanstrom?
Yeah, It doesn't sound to me, though, that in 2 weeks we would have any more of those details decided, unless I'm mistaken, because those are things that we'll be addressing down the road.
Councilmember Palermo?
Agreed. It's my point is, I think we even need a full discussion. Is this committing to the fact that, you know, for example, there must be grants and loans, but then also could be the supplement? These are all just questions, and I that's where I don't want to spend 30 minutes drilling the city attorney on this and really talking through, do we want to update some language? Because I think it is important we have something that sends a strong message to the potential investor that wants to improve this unsafe spot. Whenever I see $2 million, I just want to make sure that we're never accidentally rushing something.
And I want to clarify, $2 million, it has to show over 2 million, so 2,000,001. There's that, but it's also considered on this project, it is considered a loan. You have to have it in the form of a loan so that we receive the points that we need in the process. And then I'll just clarify one other point. I know Council Member Hills was talking about Gainesville Housing Authority. Gainesville Housing Authority, we hired them to come into our housing authority and do the day-to-day maintenance running and to help us identify how we can right the ship at the housing authority. And they're one of the best housing authorities in the state for doing this. They've done almost every type of redevelopment project that you can think that's in this realm, and they're quite skilled, quite good at what they do, and we are very blessed to have them on board with us. So just
Thank you. I believe Councilmember Morthland has a question or comment.
The way I look at this is just simply a resolution. We can work out the fine print in coming weeks. This time is of the essence here. And I look at it as being, when you're studying with your children for a test, is it better to have several days to study for the test, or do you want to cram? And the reason I say that is because when you cram, you start missing things. And if we're missing something on that final application weeks down the road because we have pushed this down 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden here comes the resolution and everybody's trying to run and chase and do everything, we can just get ahead of that. We can go ahead and be in favor of the resolution now, and we can work out the fine details after the fact. I don't see a reason why this can't come to committee tomorrow for those details, or possibly the next committee meeting after that, but this is just a resolution for support.
Thank you. Any other
We
comments?
also need a letter that's going to be signed, so the resolution gives permission for the letter to kind of discuss favorable financing. They're one and the same, but they check 2 boxes on the application. So,
Councilmember Palermo.
Another thing for this council to consider is we could always defer it to committee tomorrow, and instead of saying that it would be brought forward to council on April 24th, it could always be no later than April 24th. There could always be a special called meeting for this item as well, with the potential of timing, if timing's of the essence. But again, I think any time that we're pledging that we're dedicated regarding $2,001, I think better to make sure that before we're voting to sign off on that we're having that full discussion. So again, if I think this council certainly could pass this tonight, and I think it is just a resolution, so I think it certainly makes sense if council chooses to do that, and I absolutely have great confidence in this council. At the same time, for me personally, I'd certainly support it if we went to committee first, and then whether in a special called meeting or on the 24th, then ended up passing a resolution.
Councilmember Beeson.
Y'all just mentioned the letter as well. Could you walk us through exactly all of the items that are going to go before council and what you're going to need from us before this May deadline?
the letter is just signed by the mayor after you guys approve this resolution. It's just a narrative maybe of this resolution, but it checks 2 boxes for us on the application.
So it's the resolution and then the letter?
Yes, yes, but the letter is not it doesn't need to come back to council. It just can be formulated and signed as a result of the resolution.
Got it.
Thank you.
We are also, we have a meeting tomorrow as a board, and some of the things that we are passing tomorrow are hinging on what you do tonight. So we will most definitely be calling probably a special called meeting after the 24th.
Councilmember Vanstrom.
One thing I'd like to compliment you on is I know you very well, and I know Eric, and I know how organized you guys are. And I applaud the fact that you are trying to get this as organized as possible and cover every possibility of getting that extra half point that you need. And I really greatly appreciate that. And I have full confidence that you guys are taking us down the correct path. Just to clarify, this $2.1 million in the form of a loan it has to be that number, correct?
It has to be that number or above.
Or above.
Right.
And we're open to
more.
we're not.
Yeah,
I was gonna say.
4. We
That's
asked
for the
for
artwork.
4.
Or 6. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that because
Like I said, we are still 6.5 million short from a $30 million redevelopment project. And
Wow.
so every one of these decisions greatly affects us. And we are working and we are meeting with, like I said, state senators and for appropriations from them as well and other sources. So we are trying to get as much as we can in place, which is key for the points to be awarded.
Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you. And again, just an example is, and what I'd want to discuss in committee is even just the word grants. Do we want grants? Is that something required, necessary? Is it binding? But I without getting into the details of resolution for our audience that's not typically here every Monday night, I think just such a we have such a great example of civil service where literally they get paid nothing to take on an amazing challenge that existed because prior to them being there was a deal that was created that was really attractive and really profitable for potentially some developers or investors, and left the housing authority in a situation where they were no longer able to maintain things, et cetera. And so now we have 2 hardworking volunteers, and obviously there's other volunteers as well that are with them as well, just not here in person. So just such great work from civil servants that just wanted to help their community. So I just want to make sure that's completely clear. And then so my whole point is having the utmost confidence in this current group, as well as the utmost confidence in this council. And again, just anytime we're passing a resolution that mentions $2,001, then just wanting to make sure that we've absolutely took our time and made sure that it's got all the right details in it.
Thank you. We still need to go to the public. Is there anybody in the public that would like to comment on this before I call for a motion? Seeing nobody in the public, Councilmember Hills, are you prepared to make a motion?
I am,
Please do.
with all due respect. A motion to approve a resolution of the mayor and council supporting the Roswell Housing Authority and promoting redevelopment of housing authority property through various means.
Do we have a second? Dr. Vanstrom, Councilmember Vanstrom, second. Those in favor, please raise your hands. That's 4. Those opposed? 1. Passes 4-1. Thank you.
And Mayor Pro Tem, my request when the mayor writes his letter, I hope he would detail that my opposition was not to the underlying intent, but more of just the process and discussion.
So noted in the public record. Moving on to the next item. Councilmember Palermo, can you read the first community development item, please?
Item number 3, approval of the request 202-30497 to modify zoning conditions located at 260 Crossville Road. Ms. Dybel?
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. First item on the community development agenda is 260 East Crossville Road. The request is to modify a zoning condition. As stated, the applicant would like to allow for animal care indoor animal care, in order to have a cat clinic at this location. The property here is located at 260 East Crossville, as shown on the aerial on your screen. As you can see in the zoning map, the property is zoned Parkway Village. In 1993, the property received a hardship approval in the Parkway Village with 7 conditions. And number 7 was to limit the use of the property to residential, business, and professional use, limiting to medical, dental, legal, financial, architectural, real estate, engineering, manufacturers, representatives, mainly office uses. Animal care indoor falls under our personal service use, and that was the same back in 1993. So the request is in order to change that to allow for the animal care indoor. This is the easement plan shown here. The access drive is shared with the property at 250 East Crossville. The building is in the front and the parking area in the rear. Around about approximately 1,300 square foot existing building with 10 parking spaces, 2 in the front with 8 in the rear. And as stated, it has shared access with the property at 250 East Crossville. Some history on the property, indicated earlier in 1993, the hardship approval. In 2000, the Board of Zoning Appeals approved a variance to reduce the parking on the property. But then 4 years later, the applicant or the owner of the business at the time requested a variance to the Parkway Village in order to install a parking lot. So they received a variance to the rear buffer in 2004 from the mayor and council at that time. Staff does recommend approval with 2 conditions. There shall be no outdoor animal care activities, and the white split rail fence shall be replaced between the existing stone columns along Crossville Road to maintain the requirements for the Parkway Village District. Do you have any questions for staff?
Does council have any questions for staff? Councilmember Beeson.
To confirm, so this is a cat clinic that was a previously operating business in the city of Roswell, correct?
That's correct, at 1002 Canton Street.
And has the business ever received any kind of complaints or anything like that previous?
Not to our knowledge.
So a longstanding relationship operating as a business in the city of Roswell with no complaints?
Yes, for 30, from what I understand, around 30 years.
Thank you.
And the applicant is here this evening to present.
Okay. Any other questions from council? Councilmember Palermo.
I don't have any more questions for staff. It sounds like the applicant will present, so I'll probably have some questions for the applicant.
So if the applicant is here, could you please come? And for the record, if you would please state your name.
My name is Dr. Michael Ray. I'm the owner of the Cat Clinic of Roswell.
Thank you.
I'm Rick Olson. I'm the owner of Christian Brothers Roofing and 260 East Crossville.
Hi, I'm Sarah Bird, and I am helping the Cat Clinic purchase this building.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're planning on doing or what you do?
Yes, my goal is to resume my practice. It was previously on Canton Street up until December, and we're hoping to open in this location. We have a short and long-term plan of being cats only, which keeps us a lot quieter, and there is no interest in outdoor animal activity.
Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall. So you just addressed the one thing I was going to ask and discuss. So with it, the majority of my almost 7.5 years have been over ComDev, which has code enforcement, and I've never once heard a complaint of the cats at the cat clinic. I have heard complaints from a lot of strangers calling in of different, frankly, dog locations. And I'm a dog owner, so with all due respect, I'm a dog person, not a cat person. But that being said, with you mentioning the intent that it's going to be just cats and no dogs or other louder animals, would you be comfortable with if there was an added condition that it was to be for just cats? Is that something that would give you any concerns?
Not at all. Completely comfortable with that.
All right, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Dr. Vanstrom.
Yes, and I would also suggest the not outdoor activities? Is that, you're you amenable to no outdoor activities as well?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. You can go ahead and take a seat, and we'll ask if there's anybody in the public that would like to make a comment.
May I make a comment?
Oh, I'm sorry, please do. One moment.
Hi. My name is Rick Olson. This is wonderful because I'm a Vietnam veteran. Corporal Swain and the recognition that he had was just something special to me. It's been 60 years since I was a Boy Scout. I can still say the Boy Scout oath, I can assure you. I moved to Atlanta in '72 when I got out of the Navy. In 1978, I started out as a home builder. I built my first house for my family on Skyland Drive over here in Roswell. Raised my children there until we moved into Alpharetta. I know we absconded, but my kids used to play in the Azalea Park. As a home builder, I built the houses in Victory Ridge subdivision, developed a pod in the back of Barrington Farms. When the market collapsed, I started Christian Brothers Roofing and outgrew my home office and bought that building in 2016. Before that, it's been great, but now I've outgrown that building. I'm turning the company over to my daughter, so I like being around Roswell. I've been here for a long, long time. I was blessed 3 or 4 years ago when Mayor Laurie asked me to give the business community prayer at the National Day of Prayer here in Roswell out in the front. So I sort of get goosebumps. This is home. This is a special place to me. And I had several people, they like the location. That traffic count is delightful. But I knew you weren't going to, I talked to Jackie about it early on. It wasn't going to be a hair and nail salon. It wasn't going to be a personal care and massage parlor. And there were a number of people who wanted to put it under contract. I'd researched what was there, what the Parkway Village District was all about. And there were a number of contracts that I didn't accept because they just didn't fit the character of what the Parkway Village District is. So I'm happy to have these guys here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And if you could please state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, do I have to state my address?
Street.
Okay. My name is Kelly Skelly Kohler, and I'm on Chipping Court. And first of all, I'm very grateful that you guys are going to hear my comments tonight. I don't think I can start until I back up a little bit and plead with all of you to look at the original intent and purpose for the Parkway Village Corridor. I am seeing, as a resident in the neighborhood directly behind this address, just to state that, I've seen over the last 13 plus years that the corridor is not being enforced as stated in our uniform, I believe it's called the Uniform Code. And I've seen that, I've read over it over the past 13 and a half years, and what I'm seeing is that buffers, fencing, shrubs, trees, etc., are not only not being replaced when commercial businesses turn over to new owners or new leasers, but it's not being enforced. And so if you all can please look at the Parkway Village Corridor and what those purposes were. I know the code is very long, it's not fun reading, but as a resident and my neighbors as well, we're noticing increased noise, light pollution, etc. And so I wanted to start with that, and then just to reiterate, the corridor, for those of you who don't know, behind me is Roswell's main drive. We know it is Highway 92. It goes from East Crossville to Crossville all the way down to Hardscrabble. It has prominent, thick plantings. It has a white fencing that, no offense, used to look very lovely and clean and unbroken, and in a lot of places it is broken now. My problem isn't so much with the fence, it's with the buffers that do what they're supposed to do. They're to buffer noise, traffic, sirens, etc., from the residences that live along 92. The next thing I wanted to say is that all along the Crossville along Crossville Road, which is in the corridor. I'm seeing that commercial business owners are out of code compliance. And I've addressed this in personal meetings with Jason Gaines, Jackie Diebel, and I've appreciated that time. But I've not really gotten any movement on what actions are going to be taken. And that's really why I'm here tonight to represent my neighborhood. Because to me, a code that is stated should be enforceable. And if it's not enforceable, then why have a code? And so I wanted to address that to you. How do we get that enforced? Moving on, let me see where I am here. For this agenda item at 260 Crossville Road, my neighbors and I would be perfectly fine approving the modification for zoning to animal use if those two items are added, that it is only cats and that it is only indoor. I think that that is extremely important. And also, we'd be fine approving it if a condition of use is added, that Michael Ray replace the dilapidated fence that runs all along 260 and actually beyond that to an 8-foot fence that's sturdy, made of those specific materials in the code. Right now, the fence is falling down in places. It's had to be undergirded in 5 or 6 places. Jason and Jackie and one of my neighbors was kind enough to walk behind there and see it for themselves. I would like that added. I don't believe that a fence should have to be held up for commercial business by residential people that are living there. That is the job of the code for those commercial businesses. In one section of the fence, it's actually not even 4 feet high because of water runoff. That's also easily seen. That was seen when they were out there this past week as well. So I would ask that those stipulations be added before approval. And that's all I have on this item.
Wait. Thank you. Could you please restate your name?
Kelly Skelly Kohler.
Thank you, Kelly. Councilmember Palermo.
I have a follow-up question for you. So first of all, what was the last thing? You mentioned the fence piece. What was the thing you mentioned regarding water runoff?
So there's water runoff that's been along that whole back side. I guess I'll just go in and disclose. My property runs that whole line of commercial businesses. And so over the years, buffers have not been replaced. I took multiple pictures for Jason and Jackie of dead trees, totally non-existent shrubs. Fencing that is literally my chain link is holding it up. I mean, you can see right through. A dog could crawl through in multiple places. And so it would be fencing to 8 feet. And then where there's water runoff, I don't know, I didn't see anything specifically in the code about that. And then I'm fine with it being used as a cat clinic as long as it's no outdoor and cat only.
So that part was clear. So basically, what I was stating, because actually there's something else relevant for staff, not as relevant for the applicant, which is regarding the code enforcement items. What I'd really appreciate is either Mr. Gaines, if you're able to provide me a list in our next meeting in the next week or two, or if you're able to email or would like to meet. It absolutely is crucial that within our code, if we have a rule, that it's being followed and that code enforcement is enforcing it. And this is a commercial corridor where the mayor and council have empowered code enforcement to be proactive. What I will say regarding the buffers is, so obviously this one is something that's had an exception, that obviously there's the ability to remove or not to continue to grant in certain ways, but separate from something that's more historical. Literally either a property or two over from this, there were 4 potentially combined properties, and they did have a request to not follow the buffer rules. Right. And I absolutely was a strong advocate that we absolutely needed to continue to follow the buffer rules, and as well as frankly following small tract status rules as well, which is not to grant the small tract status unless it truly seems that it'd be absolutely impossible for it to not be to be followed. So I'd say this mayor and council does take that seriously and will continue. I know that unfortunately previous mayors and council have not always has done that, but I feel that is being followed today. I just wanted to state that. So that was everything I had for you. I do actually, we'll have some questions and discussion with the applicant, but after the public comment.
May I say one more thing?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I appreciate what you did because I know what you're referencing about that property. And I will state that at 260, they were given approval for that decreased buffer. It's like 4 feet to put the parking lot in. So obviously I know the same trees and shrubs can't go in that 4-foot distance, but I would ask that whenever council is addressed with variances to commercial property within Roswell, that you guys really look at what buffers are there, what fencing is there, and then make sure that that goes in if that changes.
And what I would just point out as well, so that variance that was granted for this property, I'm the individual up here that's been serving the longest, and that was long before I was on council. I absolutely do think it's important that we have a code and it needs to be followed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Beeson.
Kelly? Sorry. One more question for you. So since we can't see it on here and it wasn't given in our materials, to clarify, so there's a privacy fence along this back property line? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And you said it's 8 feet tall? Is it?
It's currently 6 feet.
6 feet tall, and you're requesting 8 feet?
Requesting 8 feet.
Okay.
Not just because it's dilapidated, but because it's never really been in existence since I've lived there. My neighbor that's up the street from me has been there 25 years, and it's never been there since she's been there either. So I guess what I'm saying is the code that's stated is not being enforced for commercial businesses.
Got it.
And so therefore we're getting noise, it's unbearable.
Got it. So you're trying to make a buffer.
I know you don't live, I don't expect you to know if you don't live there, but.
No, it makes sense. You're trying to create a buffer essentially, since there's the condensed buffer that exists. It's because we can't really see it on here. So you're describing for us what you see.
And to address that too, I've sent loads of pictures to the code enforcement. I've had meetings, and so I can send those to any one of you if you want to see them. My neighbors and I are happy to walk it. It's more just going back to what it used to be in the Parkway Village instead of just letting it die off and totally become dilapidated to where there's no fencing, there's no shrubs, there's no trees, and that's really what we're wanting.
So maintaining your buffer.
Just maintaining the code.
Got it. Thank you.
And I will state really quick, we had a light thing that happened that was outside of code, and I got really great response about that. So I didn't want to be all negative about that. That was handled in about 4 weeks. So, but that was specifically lights shining into our property.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Kelly.
Appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
Anybody else in the public have a comment? Okay, I'll bring it up. Here we go. And if you would please state your name.
I'm Sue Dupart. I live at 500 Shadowwood Court. I was noticed walking down Alpharetta Highway, what used to be, I think, Marconi Grill. Lots of trees were fallen, and you could see the back lot of Sway Branch. Sometimes I wonder what the arborist does. Are they just looking at their computer and paper? Because when you drive at a traffic light, and I push the safety button issue, and I've seen a cigarette-looking tree on Smith property, and it was taken care of that it could fall on Norcross Street. But we really have to look, when something's up for sale, for the city to be aware, community development should be on the planning. If this is going to be sold, what needs to be done. You can walk a vacant property and not be noticed, but there's lots of places where dumpster walls are no longer existing. On that Brown Medical Building on Grimes Bridge Road, someone could throw a cigarette and be a fire. I was working in an office in Sandy Springs where it was next to some public housing, and someone threw their cigarette out. And that's what could happen to that Grimes Bridge office building. There's so many dormant greenery that the aphids took over, and they just got scaled back. So we need our arborists to travel around and see the beautification that's necessary. I mean, there's Texas scarlet quince. There's lots of low-growing shrubs that'll tolerate lack of water and still look good. But I really think that anytime there's a vacant property that's not moving, there's land sore. There's eyesores there. And just walking the parking lot or pulling in and turning around, on a quiet day in the office would be good for the arborist. Thank you. And also, you could have a community development Steve Stroud could talk with all the tree service companies and say to them, these are the things we want you to teach, your clients, because would you like me to plant some shrubs for you? I could do some dwarf trees, or how about a weeping little gem or something? But, they could be promoting their own business by making their clients aware of what the city code is. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Depart. Anybody else from the public before we bring it back to council? Back to council. Councilmember Palermo.
So actually I have a question for the applicant.
Would you please come back up?
Because with that, when staff had prepped me, I think I had actually asked about a fence, and there could have been some confusion, but it sounded like there was already one, so that's where I was not thinking in that grounds. But it certainly is a commercial property. There certainly will be more coming and going. And I just want to hear your thoughts. It doesn't seem to me unreasonable for a new commercial business with more coming and going to have a privacy fence on the rear of the property. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's very reasonable. I have no problem with that.
And so with that, would you be comfortable with if there was a condition that involved that there must be an 8-foot privacy fence on the rear of the property?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Actually, apologies, for as long as I've owned that building, I thought that fence was yours. I mean, really, and it is falling apart. I looked at it and wanted to reinforce it myself because I thought it was your fence. But when he came over, we looked at it and talked about it because of the landscape buffer for the eye clinic next door and everything. It just is. Don't have any problem with that. If I lived there, it's what I'd want.
Thank you.
Councilmember Beeson, did you have another question?
I was just going to say if council would be open to entertaining editing number 2 to add the additional repair of an 8-foot fence along the back of the property, but Councilmember Palermo already got through it.
Okay, any other comments from council? Are we ready for a motion, Councilmember Palermo, please?
Could staff put back the slide that had staff's recommended conditions? Motion to approve request 202-30497 to modify zoning conditions located at 260 Crossville Road. And the conditions shall be the 2 conditions that are showing on the screen, which were staff's recommendations, as well as the 2 additional conditions, which would be what would staff's recommendation be to Mr. Davidson? How would you highlight, or Ms. Dybel, how would you highlight that they only may service cats or serve cats?
Serve cats.
I think staff can do a much better job with the wording than I can.
You can, condition number 3 could indicate that there shall be no animals other than cats. Domestic cats. Yeah, be clear on that. Domestic cats to be at the cat clinic.
Yeah, it has to remain the cat clinic. You cannot change it to the Tiger King. So, Ms. Dybel had the 3rd condition, and the 4th condition is the applicant must install an 8-foot fence on the rear property line. Does that meet your needs? Okay, those are the 4 conditions, unless I've missed anything.
Clarifying question?
Doctor, you do not service cats that somebody has captured and then they want to have it neutered, fixed, spaded?
Oh, true.
The only possible exception will be we have clients.
Yeah, and Doctor, I guess I'd be curious for your recommendation on wording that meets the intent but doesn't prevent you from doing that.
And may I just add?
Just add at the end of number 1, this is a cat-only veterinary facility.
So
Exceptions.
I would just like to add in that feline cats, they can be feral, and you can they can be domestic indoor cats. So
That's true.
So feline cat should be the condition. Is that what you're saying?
yes,
Okay,
I would suggest that,
Okay,
because
so
that
instead of
would
the
be
word
too
domestic, it'd be
prohibitive of
feline.
telling him what kind of cats he can see.
Yes, I agree.
So, Councilmember.
Say that
Manstrom.
again, the way you just said that, cat veterinarian.
I would say at the end of number 1, this is to be exclusively a cat-only veterinary facility.
And you want to define cat as?
I think cat only is clear enough.
I think so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so Ms. Dybel and Mr. Davidson, is that work having it as one? So in other words, we're going to have 3 conditions instead of 4? That works for me? Okay.
Okay, do we have a second?
So those are my 3 conditions, is the third one. So the first one is being updated to the doctor's language being added on.
Include all of that. in one.
Right. And then number 2 is staying as is. Number 3 is the applicant shall install an 8-foot privacy fence on the rear of the property. And those are the 3 conditions.
Okay, do we have a second? Dr. Manstrom, Councilmember Manstrom, second. All those in favor? And it's unanimous. Thank you very much. And I just want to make a note that I've been a patron before my cats passed away when Dr. Melinda Merck and Stephanie Globerman founded your clinic probably close to 30 years ago. Thank you, Scouts, for coming. We hope you enjoyed your evening. Come back anytime.
And the parents, I feel that's more
Yeah,
parents
more
than usual.
importantly, the parents who
So
stayed.
Normally, I feel it's one parent and 50 kids. Yeah.
Thank you all for coming. Councilmember Palermo, can you please read the next community
Item number 4,
development item?
approval of a text amendment to the Unified Development Code regarding Section 10.2.10, screening walls and fences. This is the first reading. Mr. Davidson?
Mr. Davidson, could you please read the item?
Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend the Unified Development Code by modifying Article 10, Site Development, Section 10.2.10, Screening Walls and Fences. Now therefore, the mayor and council of the city of Roswell, Georgia, pursuant to their authority, do hereby amend Article 10, Site Development, Section 10.2.10, Screening Walls and Fences of the Unified Development Code, the text of which is incorporated herein by reference, and if approved, this is the first reading.
Lenore, would you please present the item?
I'll be happy to. Good evening. As stated, this is the first reading for Section 10.2.10, Screening Walls and Fences. The text as initiated by Mayor and Council was presented at Planning Commission. And the first thing I'm going to list for you is the text changes that were initiated by Council, and then I'll provide to you the recommended changes that Planning Commission offered. The first is number 7, the original text at the top of the screen. It would be rewritten to read a screening wall or fence located along a side street, side interior, or rear setback can be no more than 8 feet in height. Number 8 would be changed to read as on the bottom of the screen, a screening wall or fence located between the primary street and the front wall plane of the principal building may not exceed 6 feet in height, provided the transparency of the screening wall or fence above 4 feet exceeds 25%. So just to clarify, a 4-foot maximum fence is allowed. You can go up to 6 feet if you provide transparency at 25% in that top 2 feet. There would be a change to the graphics associated here, and that is to have a graphic that actually shows the structure so that you can see the front of the property, the sides of the property, as well as the rear, and demonstrate the language that's actually in the text. And then number 9 would be read to state the finished face of all screening walls and fences must be located toward the abutting property. This is just to clarify that it's screening walls, not just walls. This is a place where we had walls being referred to as retaining walls, screening walls, all sorts. So we wanted to make sure that we clarified that. Number 10, screening wall or fence height is measured from the subject property grade to the highest point of the fence. And also because of some issues in the field, screening walls or fences may not be used to retain dirt or other materials. That would be a retaining wall. And so we just want to make sure that that was clear to those reading the code. Planning Commission did recommend some changes, approval with the following changes. Number 7 would actually remain essentially the way that it is written today, but it would be changed to say that a screening wall or fence located in a rear yard can be no more than 6 feet in height. And then number 8, a screening wall or fence located in a side yard can be no more than 6 feet in height. Number 9, a screening wall or fence located in a side yard fronting a street can be no more than 4 feet in height. Number 10, a screening wall or fence located in a front yard could be no more than 4 feet in height. And then numbers 11 and 12 basically just get renumbered. There's no changes to the wording. And then they also added, because of a definition that's in Article 14, this is a recommended addition to the changes, and that is to delete the second sentence in the defined term for setback, which says that building setbacks and yards are considered one and the same. So there's actually definitions for yards elsewhere in the text, which are very clear about what that is. It's between the building and whatever the side, the rear, or the front you're referring to. So this recommendation is one that staff does support. I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Does council have any questions for Lenore right now? Councilmember Palermo.
So it's actually more commentary for this council and for the public. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to discuss the version that was initiated with the one exception to incorporate what an intent that Planning Commission had brought in, which was to address the transparency of the screening wall or the fence above 4 feet exceeds 25%. So in layman's terms, what I'd like to discuss with this council and staff is I'd like to discuss moving forward what was initiated with the exception of, for it to be that in the front yard, it needs to be a maximum of 4 feet, with the one exception I would see is if it's wrought iron, and I don't know if staff has a better way to articulate that, but basically to where when you see some wrought iron ones, they're so transparent because you can completely see through because there's just a thin pole among a bunch of other thin poles. So that'd be the only exception that if 50% of it is 50% of the height is wrought iron, then it could go up to 6 feet, for example. Or I guess columns that are a maximum width of 18 inches and spread a minimum of 8 feet. No, that wouldn't work. So that's what I want to discuss with this council. So in other words, making it so that in reality, if you're putting a wood fence up, then in your front yard, 4 feet is going to be the maximum. You can't do 4 feet and then an extra 2 feet where you're just able to see through that wood. That's the intent I'd like to discuss, and certainly open to any thoughts from this council, and then obviously later from the public.
Councilmember Beeson.
Just to clarify, so we're discussing the version as initiated, so disregarding Planning Commission's changes, with the exception of front yard only for that height discrepancy, for that 4 foot the 4 foot transparency with wrought iron.
I'm happy to discuss whatever that you and the rest of this council would like.
I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
That is what you stated is my preference and my request.
I'm good with that, and I'm good to move forward with that.
Councilmember Vanstrom.
Yeah, I think one of the things the Planning Commission suggested was 6 feet for privacy in the rear, and I can see over a 6 foot wall, and I think 8 feet is much more reasonable for privacy. By definition, privacy means that you aren't having people looking over your fence, and I think that's necessary in the back. The 4 foot homework has brought me to seeing some really, really atrocious looking fences that are done in the front that are 4 feet, and then they've got some mesh work that you can see through often that is not very pleasing architecturally. So I envisioned, and originally these discussions, I envisioned a beautiful wall, stone stacked wall with some wrought iron characterizations on the top, but we are also including fencing, and so I think we have to be careful there. So 4 feet.
Councilmember Beeson.
Clarifying question for staff. The original intent of this discussion was to more clearly define where is considered a front yard, a side yard, the front street, the side street, how the building is clearly defined, not necessarily redefining the entirety of heights of fences and how we're defining fences. Is that true?
Correct. The original intent was to better describe where fences could go in terms of something you can find in reality, as opposed to a setback, which, as we talked about, I'm sure all of us could go out and mark exactly where our setbacks are in our property. And so that was to give something that's more real in the world, to be able to, not only for a property to know where they can put their fence and then the height associated with those locations, in a more clearly defined description, but also to make it easier for staff to be able to enforce it, because the same questions would come up when we tried to enforce, where does the 6 start, where does the, it was a little complicated. So we were trying to find a way to simplify it. The height was never anything that we had been raised as necessarily a question, but it certainly is a point that the Planning Commission discussed.
I'm always about simplifications to the UDC. With that, I'm good with if Councilmember Palermo wants to make the motion.
We need to go to the public first. Any Councilmember Palermo?
And again, I guess, staff, perhaps you could help translate. So basically knowing that my one change that I would want to make would be to Section 8 that was initiated, but I don't, what I want to do is have an exception for wrought iron, because that wrought iron was brought to my attention as an exception that has such an enormous transparency and does have a very nice look for those that choose to do it. So I would certainly not want to have anything that's saying someone can't have a higher fence in the front if you can see fully through it. I guess actually we can go to you afterwards if you can think of a way to accomplish that in number 8, where if it's going to be wood, if it's going to be non-transparent, then it's a 4 feet maximum period. If they're going to use wrought iron, I don't know if you do that through just a higher transparency percentage or specifically call out wrought iron, but that'd be the one thing for you to noodle on while this council and the public gives any comments.
Councilmember Vanstrom?
Well, then we should probably noodle on a stone wall that's 4 feet that you can do something artistic on the top. I mean, that's the problem with all this, is you get into the, is there a way just to have it so that they can come asking for variances and requests?
The problem is today there's not the need for when coming in an offense, and there's been so few complaints, and frankly, what's moving forward with the clarification that was initiated, that is going to address the complaints that we've seen. I don't like the idea of adding the extra red tape to that process. So for example, we had an item today with the cat clinic where we said, first of all, that they can have an 8-foot wall, which if we passed the Planning Commission's recommendations, with all due respect, that would not have been a choice, which I think there's a lot of residents that would prefer an 8-foot fence in their backyard. But in addition to that, frankly, if they're going to do wrought iron, I don't believe you can put that on wood. It's going to have to be stone. It's going to be pretty artistic. It's going to be something that definitely is adding some interesting character. And I just want to make sure that the 4-foot requirement in the front, currently the exception is if from 4 feet to 6 feet exceeds 25%. And instead, I want to change that to something that if it's built with wrought iron or some other way that council or staff prefers it's worded. And again, this is the first reading tonight, so we'll of course have a second reading.
Yeah, and
as well.
so I guess the clarification is wall versus fence. Is that part of it? It'll be part of this discussion? Because
Lenore, can you clarify that? Is there a distinction between wall and fence?
So screening wall is typically a masonry wall. It may be masonry combined with some sort of a fence panel, but typically the screening wall is actually a masonry wall of some sort, whereas a fence is either wood or metal. I am doing some searching trying to figure out, because they're not just made out of wrought iron, some are made out of steel, but there's not any terminology that I have found yet that will describe the picket style as thin as what you're describing, and some terms that we could use may lead to things that you would not be interested in. So I'm doing some more work for some wording for you, but it would be a fence type that we need to figure out what that wording would be.
Thank you. While you're doing that, maybe we can go to the public. Is there anybody in the public? Go ahead, Kelly, if you would just, for the record, tell us who you are again.
Yes, Kelly Skelly Kohler, and it's Chipping Court. And not to beat a dead horse, I thought it was interesting that this agenda item was right underneath the other one. But just to clarify, a lot of the wrought iron is actually made with aluminum, which is a much cheaper bendable material. And I, as a resident, I don't know if everyone's going to be able to afford a wrought iron, so I don't know, maybe keep that in mind. The other thing is in living where I live and talking to neighbors over the past 13 years, just in my neighborhood, We would like the freedom to always be able to go up to 8 feet. Nothing less than that. I'm 5'10", like you said, Mr. Vanstrom. You can pretty much see over 6 feet if you just get on your tiptoes. So I do not approve going down to 6 feet at all. I had read the 4 feet on the front. That's fine. That's what it's been. And just wanted to add that, again, I would like to see for co-compliance enforcement to be happening, not just with new fences going up in this case, but with the ones that are coming down as well, or needing to come down for commercial specifically. So that's all I wanted to comment on.
Thank you. Ms. Russell?
Thank you, Janet Russell. So my question will be with these fencing. It's funny that we're talking about fencing because right over here on Forest Street, just past on Hill and Forest on the corner, it's where Tomahawk Tree stores all their trucks and somebody else stores trucks. And there is a fence with barbed wire on the top of it. That's like this on the top. Looks like Birkenwald or Buchenwald. It's not pretty. You've probably driven by it and never noticed it on the way to Oak Street. It's on the right. It takes up the entire block. I thought the city owned it for a while, but the fence is falling down. During the big storm, not Saturdays, but the storm last week or 2 weeks ago, the fence, parts of it fell down and covered the sidewalk, and it's 2 layers of fence, kind of a bamboo-y thing and more junky broken wood. And they've actually taken some, not 2x4s, but the things you put on fences, you know, the cross piece, and they just sort of nailed it up there. How can we not enforce? And that fence comes right down to the sidewalk, and it is holding dirt back. I'm looking at all your little comments about holding dirt. It's not, it's wood. It's probably been there for 30 years, or whoever owns it, the property owner is in New Jersey, because I checked. Julie helped me, or somebody helped me at ComDev. We need to take action on a place that's within a block of our own city hall, because that fence faces Roswell Housing Authority property, and that sends a message to our residents: we don't care about you because we let you live in a fallen down, broken slum. You wouldn't let it happen if it was in Horseshoe Bend or in front of Inverness. It would never be there. So I invite you all during the day to exit this parking lot, take a left, turn a right on Forest, and you will notice what I'm talking about. And they have numbers written with a spray paint can on the metal fence. That is the gate that the trucks go in, 825 or 285 or something giant, that they just spray painted it, which is not allowed either. So, you know, I think it's fine about the fencing, I do. But we need to clean up our own house first, and it's within a block of this building. Because we have people that come here to visit us and our historic assets, and they may walk on that street to get to Oak Street. And it's like we've invited them into Yemen in war zones. So I suggest that you all take the time when you're not busy, and I know you are, to look to your right as you head to Oak Street, and you are going to be shocked at what you see.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. Anybody else? Please come up, sir. Jason? If you'd let us know for the record who you are, please.
I'm Mickey Mouse. Jason Yowell. I don't have a problem with the original recommendations. What Planning Commission is recommending is just makes no sense at all. I don't know what they're thinking unless their next move is to prohibit people from having window shades in their homes, because basically they want to strip the privacy opportunity from every property owner in Roswell, which is, I wouldn't think the direction that we really want to go. To call a 4-foot fence a privacy screening fence is a contradiction in terms, because it's not screening anything and it's offering no privacy. And to lower the fence height allowance on a side yard that faces a busy road is just, I don't know. I can't imagine what the conversations must have been like. Are they concerned that somehow we're becoming a home of, I don't know, houses of ill repute or drug dens that need the transparency from the street to see what activities are going on the property? I just think they need to find other things to work on and recommend than, basically what they did here, which is mystifying. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yowell. Is there anybody else from the public that would like to comment before we bring it back? Thank you. Eric, if you could please let us know who you are. And
Yes, Eric Schumacher on Planning Commission. So it's interesting to follow. I'd like to clarify a few things. So I would like for council to consider some of the language that we suggested, mainly to try to simplify by using the term yard to describe the distance between the primary structure and the street, right? Because what I heard in committee was that code enforcement has some difficulty in enforcing the code because they don't know where the setbacks are. And we already have the terms yard that describe the distance between the structure and the property lines. So I would encourage you to take the opportunity to simplify our fence code by using those terms yard and looking closer at the edit we'd like to make to the definition for setback too, because it is confusing. I think it's already an opportunity to clarify the difference between yard and setback, because they are not the same in the city of Roswell. Regarding the fence height, this is more around, for the front yard, for instance, this is more around the fact that this originally came up as an item because we have some code enforcement issues and we had some 6-foot fences in the front yard, and those should have been included in your packet. They were passed on by the person that actually brought this up as an issue. So we have some 6-foot fences that come all the way out to the street. And I understand that code enforcement may have visited and made a small change or a small request to change the transparency on the top 2 feet to the 25% transparency. So there's lattice across the front property line, but it's still board on board down the side property line. And, the addition of the code for a 4-foot fence in a side yard when it's fronting a road isn't because it's a busy road. It's because if we have a city block and we have corner lots, in the city of Roswell, corner lots have been given different types of side yards and in some cases no rear yards. So it's a little bit confusing and not consistent across the city because some corner lots have 2 front yards and 2 side yards and no backyard. Some have a backyard which also fronts a street, right? So the problem is that in a neighborhood where you have a city block, the corner lots are breaking up the streetscape because those corner lots will build a tall fence all the way out to the street where their neighbor isn't actually able to do that same thing because that rear yard may look to everybody else like a front yard because it's a corner lot. So it's not really about reducing privacy. It's more about ensuring a consistent streetscape in our neighborhoods. And it's just hard to actually sculpt that language to apply in all cases. There will be cases where it doesn't work, but for the majority, this language helps with ensuring that streetscape. The other thing that we noted is that the 25% transparency for the top 2 feet for a 6-foot fence in the front yard isn't really that transparent when you're at the street. It really looks like a solid fence. Now, the code that we purchased, it was 50% transparent. And if you go look around at other cities that have the same code, it's still the 50% transparent. So what we try to do is remove that issue that we're seeing with a streetscape problem in the city of Roswell. Now, I would love to ensure that we still have fences available for people without permits, because we don't want to get into the business of permits for regular fences. Now, the majority of other cities in Georgia have a maximum height of 6 feet. We have 8. It's just not the majority. I would suggest to you that an 8-foot fence is actually pretty tall and pretty oppressive on a small lot. I actually have a lot that has an 8-foot fence from the neighbor. It's green on one side because it doesn't let any sunshine, and it's falling down because the 8-foot fence is quite a sail when it comes to the wind. So I might suggest to you that no permits for 6 feet and under, and permits for above 6 feet, and that could simplify and perhaps address Councilperson Palermo's need to specify there are some types of fences that could be taller if they're more transparent.
Thank you, Mr. Schumacher. While you're up there, since you're on the Planning Commission, are there any questions from council? Okay, thank you.
I have questions for staff later, but none for.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember, if anybody else from the public? If not, we'll take it back to council. I think Councilmember Palermo has some questions for staff.
So two things. One, not needing to discuss yet, but just to give a possibility instead of specifying or getting into wrought iron or anything like that. Currently, the code is that for the portion above 4 feet, the transparency has to exceed 25%, which is Mr. Schumacher brought up, really looks not very transparent. A way, kind of a quick and easy way to do it, and again, this is the first reading, might just be that for the transparency of the entire screening wall or fence has to exceed 25% instead of just that 2-foot portion. But that's not what I wanted to talk with staff right now. Staff, give me your perspective on the yard definition and description versus the way that you've done it. Because for me, I was kind of, when you proposed the plane, like the front of the house, that seemed pretty clear to me. I just look at where the front of the house is and I just know you can't have above 4 feet in front of that front of the house. Behind it, you can't. So that made sense to me, but give me your perspective or reaction to that compared to using the term yard.
Absolutely. I wish I had come up with it first. I actually didn't even realize that the yard definitions were in the back of the very literally last section of the Article 14 until we were looking at Planning Commission's recommendation. The yard definitions are, for example, yard front is an open, unoccupied space between the front line of a building or structure and the front boundary of a lot or an existing or proposed street right-of-way. So it is exactly what we were trying to describe when we talked about between the setback. This actually makes way more sense, and we completely agree with Planning Commission recommending to use the yard. The front, side, and rear would be very easily understood. The only thing that would then also need to be done is, as they recommended, removing that last sentence from setback so that you're not putting the two together. And that's actually something that we would recommend as a cleanup anyway, but that we definitely support that. We think it would make a lot more sense to everybody to use those definitions.
That's great to hear. So that's very helpful, and really appreciate Planning Commission's really support and recommendation in that, in making that more clear. So this council is aware, is certainly happy to a thorough discussion, knowing this is the first reading. Currently, my intent would be to motion for how it was initiated with the updates of, as Ms. Bromberg just mentioned, clarifying with the yard definition and having that update, which came from Planning Commission, and then the update that instead of above 4 feet needing to exceed 25%, that the entire fence would have to exceed 25% if it exceeded 4 feet. So that's where I currently am, but certainly happy for any recommendations and preferences of this council or staff.
Does council have, Councilmember Beeson?
Clarifying question, will you also be including in that motion Planning Commission and staff's recommendation for the yard definition to be updated?
That was the first thing I mentioned.
Sorry,
so it's
totally missed that one. I thought you said it was just as initiated.
No, so it'd be as initiated with two changes. One, being planning's recommendation with which staff said helps clarify things regarding using the term yard and using those pieces instead of what staff originally proposed. That'd be change number 1 from initiation, and change number 2 from initiation would be that instead of the portion above 4 feet exceeding 25%, that if in the front it exceeds 4 feet, the entire fence would have to exceed 25%. And that way we potentially avoid the defining of wrought iron, et cetera.
It's still the maximum 6 for the front.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It would just be clarifying that the entire fence has to exceed 25%, and it would still have that same maximum. So that's what I'd suggest, which I think avoids the concerns of outlawing these taller wrought iron fences, and at the same time avoids the concern of how do you define it. That'd be my recommendation for this council, but again, I want to make sure we have consensus, so if anyone has concerns or perhaps a different or better way to accomplish it, I'd love to discuss that.
Before we go into further discussion, Lenore, are you clear on, should Councilmember Palermo make that motion, is it clear enough to bring it, write it up?
It is clear. I just want to read to you, the wording is going to be more than just replacing setback and side yard. So in all honesty, the wording that's utilized by Planning Commission, although the numbers may not be in alignment, is more similar to what it would read for us. It would say a screening wire fence located in a side yard, and it has that definition. Just so you know that when we do the track changes between the initiation and tonight, what was initiated in the second reading, we'll track that. So it'll be a few more words than just changing out setback and yard. Just want to make sure that that is okay, but it would be the same numbers that you're talking about now.
And what I'd recommend and want to see, and if this council agrees, it'd be more clear, in the second reading, I would only want to see what was initiated, and then the red lines that passed within the first reading.
Clean version of
So it's
initiated.
completely clean. We just
Perfect.
know,
That's-
here's what was original, here's
Yep.
where we ended up from the first reading, unless
do that.
council prefers to see more different information.
Council have any comments? Councilmember Palermo, are you ready to make your motion?
All right, I'm not hearing anything else from the rest of council, so that's telling me there's consensus. If it's not, please speak up, and we'll certainly take some more time with this. But I motion to move forward in the first reading, to approve the first reading, which is based on what was initiated, with staff's updates based on the yard definition recommendation from Planning Commission, and updating that on item number 8, it may not exceed 6 feet in height, provided provided the transparency of the screening wall or fence. So basically, it would be entire screening wall or fence exceeds 25%. So it'd be getting rid of the above 4 feet.
Yep, understood.
That would be my motion.
Do we have a second? Councilmember Morthland.
Second.
All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Item number 5, Councilmember Palermo.
Item number 5, approval of a text amendment to the Unified Development Code regarding Section 3.2.6, Carriage House, Section 4.3.3, Carriage House, and Section 5.3.4, Carriage House. This is the first reading. This is the first reading. This item was deferred from the March 13th, 2023 Mayor and Council meeting. Mr. Davidson?
Mr. Davidson.
Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend the Unified Development Code by modifying Articles 3, 4, and 5 regarding carriage house distance requirements. Now therefore, the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell, Georgia, pursuant to their authority, do hereby amend Article 3, Section 3.2.6, Carriage House, Article 4, Section 4.3.3, Carriage House, and Article 5, Section 5.3.4, Carriage House of the Unified Development Code, text of which is incorporated herein by reference, and if approved, this is the first reading.
Thank you. Jackie, will you present the item?
Yes, as stated, this is text amendment, first reading for Articles 3, 4, and 5 regarding the carriage house distance for building separation. Currently in the code for the zoning classifications of AG 43, RS 87, and RS 30, the modification would be to change the building separation from 35 feet to 10. Under the code in RS 18 and RS 12, the current separation is 20 feet, that would be changing to 10 feet. This is the code currently showing you that AG 43, 87, 30 have 35, and 18 and 12 have 20.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
In section 4.3.3, under the Parkway Village, it would be modifying the building separation from 12 feet to 10 feet. Here's the code showing that currently. And lastly, in Article 5, in the Historic District, to modify the building separation from 12 feet to 10 feet. Here's what it shows in the UDC currently. The Planning Commission recommended denial of this proposed text amendment, so straight out denial. Do you have any questions for staff?
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Palermo, and I guess I'm not as nice as Mayor Wilson in providing little breaks.
Thank you. So I'd say you're less generous than Mayor Wilson with the recesses, but you're more generous to the timing of the meeting. And so I think this is, we still do have a quorum. I was watching for that. So I do not support Planning Commission's recommend to fully deny this. As I did look at it, the intent and the reason for this is we had seen multiple examples coming through the last few years, and those were on the larger lots. So those were more on the RS 30 zoning, maybe even RS 87 or ag. And so I would like to see us do a reduction. However, I would not like to reduce as much as was initiated. And so the discussion that I'd like to have with this council is I would like to discuss either for the AG 43, RS 87, and RS 30, moving from 35 feet down to 20 feet, and that being the one change, and that's one possibility I'd like to discuss. The other possibility I'd like to discuss is for all 5 of these that you can see, with 3 of them being on 35 feet and 2 of them being on 20 feet, I would like to discuss moving them down to 12 feet. So those are kind of the two discussions I'd like to have with this council. So again, to summarize, since I see Councilmember Beeson walking up, I do not intend to support Planning Commission's recommendation to deny this. I would like to see us reduce some of this based on multiple examples we've seen come through the last few years. But my question for this council is I would like to support either moving from 35 feet down to 20 feet for AG 43, RS 87, and RS 30, or move all 5 of these from 35 feet and 20 feet down to 12 feet. So those are the 2 things I would like to discuss with this council. There's 2 possible paths I'd like to discuss with this council.
Thank you, Councilmember Palermo. Does council have any comments before we go to the public? Okay. We will go to the public now. Is there anybody in the public that would like to comment? And our public is thinning. I'll bring it back to council for more discussion up here. Councilmember Hills.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Hall. I don't have an objection, excuse me, with Councilmember Palermo's recommendation on the Ag 43, RS 87, and RS 30 to go to 20. I've got concerns with RS 18 and RS 12 just being overbuilt in general. I'm concerned about the size of those lots, and then I can't decide what a homeowner might or might not want to do with their property, but it makes more sense to me that they would add on to their home rather than add another building out on their lot, and just to preserve what land they've got for an RS 18 or RS 12. So I'm concerned with that one in general. I'd like to hear what the rest of council has to say about that, but I would even be inclined to not allow carriage houses for lots those sizes.
Councilmember Morthland.
So I agree with Councilperson Hills there on the AG 43, RS 87, and RS 30. and Councilman Palermo going down to 20. My piece on the RS 18 and RS 12 is modifying the building separation from 20 to 10. What about keeping it at 20?
Councilmember Palermo.
And to clarify, that's what I'm hearing from both, if I'm hearing correctly from Councilmember Hills and Councilmember Northland, is it sounds like it's support for what I had mentioned as I mentioned two possible paths that I support. One path was just changing AG 43, RS 87, and RS 30 from 35 feet to 20 feet. And then the other one was if we moved both of those down to 12 feet. I'm hearing support from two individuals for kind of my direction A, which again, I certainly would be happy to support tonight.
Councilmember Beeson.
Clarification from staff. These are minimum footage for the carriage house additions, correct? It's not standardized footage. So that's the lowest they can go. It's not always going to be at those, at 10 feet or 20 feet, correct?
That's correct. That would be the minimum.
Okay, so given that, I'm honestly completely comfortable with moving to the 10 feet, knowing that it's not going to be taken advantage of in every single situation, but understanding that not everybody's property is going to have the same type of shape or the same topography, or maybe your house is built in an odd situation compared to where your neighbor's house is, and so you would need that 10-foot modification. I'm fully supportive of what staff's recommended at the original 10-foot.
Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you. I believe, if I remember correctly, I think in my discussion with staff, I was suggesting for discussion the possibility of 10 feet. That being said, what you just described, what Councilmember Beeson just described, if anything, I feel gives more support for keeping the current process, which is when you do have odd or challenging shapes, et cetera, that's a perfectly justified reason to request a variance, and this mayor and council can decide, which is the current process. Why I brought this forward and why I wanted to make a change was because we had multiple situations the last couple of years that were in definitely some in RS 30, maybe some in Ag 43 or RS 87, where they were requesting to reduce the minimum from 35 feet to a lower number. And in those situations, it wasn't actually due to strange shapes or anything like that. It was just that 35 feet was really larger than it needed to be for these large properties. And that was kind of the intent behind it. I don't think it makes sense to change the 10 feet because again, if we give a minimum, I feel there's going to be a lot of individuals are going to perhaps just go straight to the minimum. And I think it is better to perhaps have a number larger than 10 feet. Again, if that was 12 feet or if that was 20 feet, but knowing for those strange situations, this mayor and council will weigh in just like we've done in the past.
Any other, Dr. Vanstrom?
I have a question for staff. How do you fit a carriage house in an RS-12? And what's the definition of a carriage? It sounds like a dollhouse maybe, or a work shed. And even RS-18, how does that fit?
We've had a few come through, I have to say probably one or two in the RS-12 classification, and we've had a couple in the RS-18. So some of the lots in 12 are a little bit larger. So just remember that RS-12 zoning doesn't mean the lot might be 12,000 square feet. It could be, but it could be anywhere between 12 and 18,000. So you might have a lot that's 15 to 16 or 17,000 square feet. And maybe they have a smaller house that was built on it, and then they request the conditional use for a carriage house. And same with the 18,000 square feet. That can range anywhere between 18 and 30. So you might have some lots out there that are 24,000 square feet. They just have the zoning classification of RS-18 because they don't meet the minimum requirement of RS-30.
Council have any other comments before we call for a motion? Councilmember Palermo, if you'd make your motion, please.
I will motion to move the building separation minimum for Ag 43, RS 87, and RS 30 down from 30 to reduce it from 35 feet down to 20 feet.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Councilmember Morthland, second.
Was there public comment?
Clarifying?
Wait,
Oh,
we had comment.
We did already? Okay, yeah.
clarifying question?
Clarifying question, then also if we have public comment. So we're just not doing anything with RS 18 and RS 12, we're leaving it at 20?
In this first reading, my intention is to leave it at 20, knowing that anybody in RS 18 or RS 12 can always ask for a variance to get down to any number they'd like below 20 feet.
Understood, thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Beeson, we already had public comment on this. So, Councilmember Morthland, you had a second on this?
Yes, ma'am. Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Unanimous, thank you very much. Item number 6, Councilmember Palermo.
Approval of a text amendment to the Unified Development Code regarding changes due to zoning procedure laws. Mr. Davidson?
Mr. Davidson, please.
Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend the Unified Development Code by modifying Article 13, Administration. Now therefore, the mayor and council of the city of Roswell, Georgia, pursuant to their authority, do hereby amend Article 13, Administration, Section 13.3.4, Public Notice and Hearing Requirements of the Unified Development Code, text of which is incorporated herein by reference, and if approved, this is the first reading.
Jackie, can you please present?
Yes, so as stated, this is text amendment to UDC 13.3.4 for public notice and hearing requirements. In 2022, the state of Georgia adopted changes to the zoning procedures law regarding public notice for variances. So we are taking this text amendment through the process in order for it to be in place before the end of June. So what legal has written for us is to make changes in Section 13.3.4 for public notice and hearing requirements is to add the last sentence for letter A under published notice to state or as otherwise required by the Georgia Zoning Procedures Act. And we're adding that in the published notice and in the posted notice. So the published is for the newspaper and the posted notice is for the signage. So what this is going to be, as a request from one of the council members, we had for our charts to be placed on here to show what we currently have, and then in red is what is proposed to go to. So currently, under text amendment, or rezoning and conditional use, there's a 15 days, but not more than 45. That is staying the same for signage and for the web. Any concurrent variances that we have come through the process with either of those, it would then change to 30 days for advertisement and paper, but not more than 45, and 30 days for the signage posting. A preliminary final plat would be navigable. It's shown on the web for 15 days. That's not changing. Our design plan for design review board, that's not changing. The certificate of appropriateness that goes before the Historic Preservation Commission, that's 15 days and not more than 45. That is not changing. And then the last one under variance, that will go before the Board of Zoning Appeals or before Mayor and Council, depending on what it is. That would change to 30 days for the paper, not more than 45, and then 30 days as well for the signage and posting, and it would stay as 15 days on the web. So the Planning Commission recommended approval when they heard this last month. Staff recommends approval of the proposed text amendment.
Thank you, Jackie. Does council have any questions? Is there anybody in the public that would like to comment? Seeing no comments, back to council. Councilmember Palermo, do you have a motion?
Motion to approve the text amendment to the UDC regarding changes due to zoning procedures law.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Hills, all those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much.
Item number 7, approval of the initiation of a text amendment to the Unified Development Code, Article 10, Section 10.3 to Section 10.3.27, signs requiring a permit, Section 10.3.32, crown sign, and Section 10.3.41, sign illumination, and Section 13.4.7. What approval criteria are used?
Jackie, would you please present?
This is the initiation of a proposed text amendment to Article 10.3 under signage. So currently, our crown sign, we'll zoom in on this in a second. We are looking at making changes to 10.3.32, which is the crown sign. So what we're looking to do is for crown signs currently are allowed on buildings at least 55 feet in height and four stories. And at this point in time, crown signs are not allowed in the historic district. This text amendment would allow crown signs to go within the historic district. We're looking to add the language that a crown sign is allowed on buildings less than 55 feet and 4 stories as approved by the mayor and council. On number 4, we would be adding the words "or externally illuminated," as there is no internal illumination allowed within the historic district. And then we'd also be adding under 10.3.41 here, the crown sign may only use external illumination in the historic district. And for the dimensions, we took a look at that, and we would be adding under the DX, the downtown mixed use, and the downtown shop front. Maximum per sign is 150 square feet. Under the sign illumination, so section 10.3.41, we would indicate that crown signs in the DX or the DS zoning shall be halo or backlit with a Kelvin rating of 3,000 or lower. And then we'd be adding a section 10.3.43 that crown signs may request a conditional use to be heard before the mayor and council. So these would not be permitted by right. They must come before the mayor and council for a conditional use for approval. This is showing the Kelvin scale. We showed this recently. We're looking at a max of 3,000 kelvins that stays more on the warmer end to give you a little bit of more muted light, warmer light, compared to the cooler section of the 10,000 kelvins, which is a more bright light. And then the final portion is to add approval criteria in section 13.4.7. One is for the conditional use for signage to come straight before to the mayor and council. It would not go through any other public hearing process. It would come straight to mayor and council, but they must meet these criteria. Must be located on a building containing 4 or more stories, unless approved by the mayor and council to be located on a 3-story building. And the signage allowed must be associated with an office use that occupies the upper floors of the multi-story building or hotel use. One other thing I wanted to point out, currently we do have a section in here for crown signs, and it's listed on here because we're not changing it. It's under the number of signs. Down at the bottom, it says only 1 crown sign per building facade and no more than 2 crown signs per building are allowed. I know this was a topic of conversation related to facade. That's currently in the code. We would not be proposing to make any changes to that.
Thank you, Jackie. Councilmember Palermo.
Could you go to the next slide, please? The next one. Next one. Perfect, thank you. So I think what we discussed was allowing it for an office use or a hotel use. Is it, oh, so you have or hotel use at the end. Okay, I'm sorry. I just saw with an office use that occupies, so or hotel use, perfect. So this is something I'm supporting. I think we absolutely want to make sure that we're giving any new businesses the opportunity to succeed and to want to choose Roswell, and certainly, especially with an office use, that certainly involves giving them the opportunity to have their company's name on the building if they're going to be, potentially moving a headquarters or a large presence here. So I think this is reasonable. It's supportive for economic development, and I'm certainly supporting this first reading. And what was pointed out in this as well is that if council approves this, it does not mean that council would need to approve any specific request. It would always be a conditional use request that would come to council at a public hearing. So again, I'm supporting this tonight.
Any Councilmember Beeson.
More so recommendation, looking at 10.3.32 crown sign, the 2 example images that are provided in the UDC outside of the illustration are internally illuminated. Is there a way that we could provide an example of an externally illuminated sign, since that's what we're going to be referencing for the DX and DS zones?
We can do that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Vanstrom.
Councilman Morthland, were you illuminated enough on the luminous and Kelvin discussion? We're back to Kelvin without discussing lumen.
So honestly, I found out what Kelvin meant tonight. I was not necessarily aware of that. But from my understanding, the way that Kelvin is graded is by the heat that comes off of the product as compared to the actual brightness, which is a lumen. Is that correct?
It's the color texture, right?
Color texture.
Color temperature.
Color temperature. Okay, so yeah, here we go.
Go again.
All right.
Now, I understood it was heat.
Somebody told me it was heat, so color, temperature, one and the same, yeah. That's fine. I mean, not to make a big deal out of that, but really the big thing that I brought up at committee is, do we have a plan when one of these signs goes out in the middle? You've got the engine and the caboose, but in the middle of the train, you've got some letters that are not illuminated. Do we have a plan to address that?
Well, currently in our code, we do have the section, hold on a second. Currently, under section 10.3.21 of the sign ordinance, removal of unlawful or dangerous signs. And it indicates that the city may order the removal of any sign in violation of this article by written notice to the permit holder, or if there's no permit holder, then the owner of the sign, or if the sign owner cannot be found or cannot be determined, then to the sign erector and any party that procured the erection of sign. If a permit has been issued, such notice shall operate to revoke the permit. So, and then there's a section, I believe, that was related to damage. And I thought I had it marked because I read it at the last meeting. So there was something in here that we currently have that talks about signs that, if they're, what you mentioned the other day. So technically, we have something in the code already for that. And so if you, we could authorize someone to go over and fix their sign and meet that requirement, or remove it and then get it fixed.
What is the timing requirement on that when someone comes in with a complaint and says that this sign is not illuminated correctly, or I don't know, however we need to put that? What is the timing there? They have up until 24, 48 hours to deal with it, or what is that?
So 2 points I'll make. First is that the signs you're referring to are going to be externally illuminated, which means that the chance of there being a letter that's out is really low, because they are not each letter individually done. It's a chain of lights.
Sure.
Or a lamp that's shining on it. So first, I just want to point that out, that the type of lighting you've permitted for these in historic district limits the issues. It's either all on or all off with most of those. And so in answer to your question, if we did either see a sign that is out or we receive notification about it, within 24 business hours, we reach out to contact that property owner. Typically, right now, we have either a 5 or 7 day turnaround, business day turnaround of them addressing the problem. Again, it depends on the severity of it, safety, that sort of thing. If they don't take care of that, getting an electrician out may take a few days. So that's why we've got those kind of time frames now. And then if they don't have it corrected in that compliance, we can write a citation and they go to the next code enforcement date.
Okay.
I just have a question. So you had mentioned in the historic district, is this applicable in the whole city?
Yes, it would be, just the specific time. We don't have a whole lot of locations where internally illuminated signs are permitted in the city, so.
Do we have something in the code for any kind of illuminated sign if the light bulb, or if there is a malfunction of some sort?
Yes, any of that would be under the maintenance that's required for the signs, which was added into the enforcement section of the redo of the sign ordinance that you just passed recently.
And five days would be the time that they would have to?
That's not a codified number. That 5 to 7 business days is what the procedures have been from a code complaint perspective in the city for as long as I'm aware, but it's not ever been codified. It was a reasonable set of time that was provided. It's certainly something that we could talk to council about, and if you have a different approach you'd like to use, we can certainly talk about that.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Councilmember Beeson.
Just a quick compliment, I think it was to staff. It was noted for us when we were going over our lighting discussion for the Kelvin scale, the reason why warm and neutral was selected for the 3,000 Kelvin level was to address not only Councilmember Morthland's concerns about it being harsh on the eyes when you're driving by, but it was also noted for aesthetics for the historic district because it was supposed to replicate, as the ComDev staff mentioned to us, a gaslit district or a gaslight district, right? So you have gas lamps, you have something that's firelit, and I thought that that was well aligned with what a historic district would have. So my compliments to ComDev if that was y'all that came up with that.
Does council have any other comments? Councilmember Palermo?
Motion to approve?
Do we have a second? Second from Councilmember Beeson. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. City Attorney David Davidson.
Thank you. I have one item for closure, and that's to discuss litigation, please.
Do I have a motion to go into closure?
So move.
Second? Councilmember Hills. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you for those that stuck it out.